For those of us who have watched this show since the early 90s, the absolute mess they are setting up for Curtis today feels like a direct echo of the frantic, desperate escapes we used to see during the golden era of soap operas. I remember sitting on my living room floor decades ago, watching our beloved legacy characters pack their bags in the dead of night, fleeing from a legal system that had failed them, convinced that running was the only way to keep their families intact. But while those classic escapes were rooted in deep, long-term storytelling that made sense for the characters at the time, what we are seeing now feels incredibly reckless. If you look at the trajectory of Curtis right now, a man who has fought so hard for a peaceful life, throwing it all away to drag his wife and newborn baby on the run, is a devastating blow to his character integrity. Have the current writers forgotten how much this man sacrificed just to stand in the light? If you ask me, we are standing on the precipice of a monumental shift in the lives of this family. Right now, Curtis is sitting in a courtroom, fighting for his freedom and desperately hoping to avoid a prison sentence that would separate him from baby Desmond. We all know that Portia has been contemplating changing her testimony as a gesture of goodwill, a desperate bid to keep her husband out of a jail cell during the most crucial months of their infant son's life. I suspect that this trial is going to take a completely unexpected turn. Thanks to new developments or a sudden shift in the testimony provided by Portia, Curtis might actually walk away a free man. He might be acquitted or granted a sudden pardon, completely clearing him of the assault charges. For a brief, fleeting moment, it will seem as though Curtis and his family can finally breathe a sigh of relief. They will think they can finally go home, close the door on the nightmare, and begin their lives anew. But as veteran viewers, we know that happiness on this show is often just the calm before a devastating storm. We absolutely must talk about Isaiah and the psychological toll this verdict will take on him. This is a man whose entire identity, livelihood, and future have been wrapped up in his career as a brilliant surgeon. That career has been severely compromised, if not entirely destroyed, by the severe injury to his hand. If Curtis walks out of that courtroom a free man, completely dodging any legal consequences for the altercation that ruined Isaiah, the fallout will be catastrophic. Isaiah is not just going to nod his head and politely accept the verdict. He is going to be consumed by a blinding, venomous rage. He will feel that the justice system has entirely failed him, that Curtis has destroyed his life and is now dancing away without a single scratch to show for it. That kind of deep-seated bitterness festers in a person's soul. It turns a reasonable man into a ticking time bomb. I firmly believe that Isaiah's resentment will boil over, leading him to seek out Curtis for a direct, face-to-face confrontation. He will want Curtis to look him in the eye and acknowledge the sheer magnitude of what he has stolen from him. When that confrontation happens, it is not going to be a simple exchange of harsh words. The tension between these two men has been escalating for weeks, building into a dangerous, uncontrollable crescendo. I foresee Isaiah tracking Curtis down, his anger completely blinding him to reason and consequence. The argument will inevitably escalate from shouting into a violent physical struggle. Curtis, a man who has always relied on his physical strength and fierce protective instincts, will undoubtedly defend himself against the onslaught. But in the chaotic, terrifying blur of a physical fight, things can go horribly wrong in a fraction of a second. I fear that in his desperate attempt to protect himself and neutralize the threat, Curtis will accidentally use too much force, or Isaiah will take a fatal, tragic fall. Suddenly, the man who just won his freedom in a court of law will be standing over a lifeless body. The sheer horror of that moment will be paralyzing. Curtis will realize instantly that he has crossed a line from which there is absolutely no return, transforming a triumphant legal victory into a waking nightmare of unimaginable proportions. Let us pause and deeply consider the psychology of Curtis in that exact, horrifying moment. He is a man with a complicated, shadowed past, a man who has operated in the gray areas of the law for years as a private investigator. He knows exactly how the police work. He knows how Jordan and Anna will view this bloody scene. Given the highly publicized, bitter feud between him and Isaiah, absolutely no one is going to believe that this was a simple, innocent case of self-defense. The police will look at the history of violence, the ruined surgical career, the contentious trial, and they will see a clear, undeniable motive for cold-blooded murder. Curtis will panic. The overwhelming, suffocating fear of being ripped away from Portia, Trina, and little Desmond for the rest of his life will cloud his usually sharp judgment. Instead of calling the authorities and trusting the legal system, a system he already knows is deeply flawed and biased, Curtis will make a radical, extreme decision. He will decide that the only way to survive, the only way to keep his family together, is to run away from Port Charles forever. This is where the storyline threatens to unravel the very fabric of his character integrity. Curtis will rush home, his hands trembling, his heart pounding in his chest, and he will tell Portia to pack a bag immediately. He will insist that they have to leave town tonight, taking Trina and the newborn baby with them into the unknown. He will rationalize this frantic escape by convincing himself that he is doing it solely to protect them from the legal fallout. He will believe that if he can just get them to a safe, hidden location, he can somehow figure out a way to prove from afar that Isaiah's death was a tragic accident. But running is the absolute worst thing an innocent man can do in this situation. By choosing to flee the jurisdiction, Curtis is essentially signing a written confession in the eyes of the law. He is throwing away every single ounce of credibility he just fought so hard to establish in that courtroom, trading his freedom for the agonizing life of a wanted fugitive. I cannot even begin to imagine the sheer terror and heartbreak Portia will experience in that moment. Here is a brilliant, dedicated woman who has endured so much emotional turmoil, who has fought tooth and nail to keep her family united against all odds. She just gave birth to a beautiful baby boy. She just bravely testified to save her husband from a prison sentence. And now he is standing in front of her, covered in the invisible stain of a fatal altercation, demanding that she abandon her prestigious medical career, her beautiful home, and her entire life's work. Portia is a highly logical, grounded woman. She will instantly realize that running makes them look incredibly guilty to the outside world. She will argue with him, pleading with him through tears to stay and face the music, to trust that the truth will eventually come out. But Curtis, driven by pure, primal fear, will likely overwhelm her logical objections. Portia will be forced into an impossible, devastating corner, abandon the man she loves in his darkest hour, or become an accessory to a major crime and a fugitive on the run with a fragile newborn infant. And what about Trina? Oh, my heart absolutely breaks for that sweet, talented young woman. Trina is finally coming into her own right now. She is navigating a blossoming career in the art and music world, finding her footing, and trying her hardest to distance herself from the constant, suffocating drama of her parents' lives. To be suddenly yanked out of her peaceful life, told that she must leave her friends, her ambitions, and her bright future behind because her father has accidentally killed a man, is a tragedy of epic proportions. Trina will be torn right down the middle, her soul fractured by the impossible choice. On one hand, her loyalty and love for Curtis are incredibly deep. He is her father, and she wants to believe in his innocence. On the other hand, she knows in her heart that running away is wrong. Trina might be forced to make the most agonizing choice of her young life, stay in Port Charles and try to clear her father's name from the outside, or get in that car and disappear into the dark night, sacrificing her own dreams just to keep the family intact. The logistics of this escape will be nothing short of a nightmare for this family. Traveling with a newborn baby requires stability, medical care, and a safe environment, three things that are entirely impossible to guarantee when you are running from the law. Desmond will become the biggest reason Curtis is determined to protect his family at all costs, yet the baby is also the most vulnerable piece of this tragic puzzle. Every time the baby cries in a cheap roadside motel, Portia and Curtis will freeze in terror, wondering if someone in the next room will call the police. The irony here is so thick and bitter it is hard to swallow. Curtis is running to protect his family from being torn apart by the justice system, but the very act of running is what will subject them to a life of constant fear, instability, and trauma. A legal victory has rapidly devolved into a horrifying nightmare from which they cannot wake up. The moment the sun rises over Port Charles and Isaiah's body is inevitably discovered, the entire town will be thrown into absolute chaos. The police department will immediately launch a full-scale homicide investigation, taping off the crime scene and searching for clues. And when they realize that Curtis, the man who had the most obvious motive in the world, has suddenly vanished into thin air along with his entire family, the narrative will be set in stone. Anna and Jordan will have absolutely no choice but to name Curtis as the prime suspect in a murder investigation. The PCPD will launch a nationwide manhunt, plastering Curtis's face across news stations and turning a proud, protective father into a desperate, hunted fugitive. The friends and family left behind, like Marshall and Stella, will be dragged into interrogation rooms, their lives turned upside down by Curtis's reckless decision to flee rather than stand his ground. As they go on the run, the psychological toll on this family will be absolutely devastating. We have seen couples try to survive life on the run before on this show, and it almost always fractures the very foundation of their relationship. Portia and Curtis have the potential to be a modern super couple, but this kind of relentless stress is a slow acting poison. Living in the shadows, looking over their shoulders every single second, jumping at the distant sound of a police siren, it will wear them down to the bone. Portia will eventually begin to deeply resent Curtis for forcing this terrifying life upon her and their innocent baby. She will look at her infant son, who deserves a warm nursery and a stable, loving home, and she will question whether protecting her husband is truly worth sacrificing her child's entire future. The tension between them will be palpable, a ticking clock counting down to an inevitable heartbreaking explosion. If you look closely at the long-term storytelling here, you have to wonder if Curtis even realizes that he is repeating the very mistakes he swore to leave behind forever. For years, he operated in the dangerous shadows, taking massive risks and living on the edge of legality. He fought so incredibly hard to step into the light, to build a legitimate, peaceful existence where his family could thrive without fear. But the very moment true adversity strikes, his first instinct is to revert right back to those old, shadowy survival tactics. He is letting his fear dictate his actions rather than his faith in the truth and the family he built. It is a tragic, glaring character flaw, one that the writers are clearly exploiting to push this family to their absolute breaking point. Is he truly running to protect his family, or is he running because he simply cannot face the harsh reality of what he has accidentally done? Eventually, the harsh reality of their situation will catch up with them, as it always does in the world of soap operas. The police will close in, or the crushing guilt and fear will become simply too heavy for Portia to bear. I foresee a heartbreaking, pivotal moment where Portia realizes that she can no longer subject little Desmond and Trina to this life of constant terror and instability. She will have to make a choice that will define the rest of her life: continue to run and risk losing her children to the foster system if they are caught by the authorities, or pack up the baby, leave Curtis behind in hiding, and return to Port Charles to tell the police the absolute truth. It would be a betrayal born of profound, desperate love for her children, a massive sacrifice that could completely destroy her marriage but ultimately save her family's future from total ruin. As a viewer who has dedicated decades of my life to these characters, watching this family spiral into such a dark, desperate place is incredibly difficult to witness. We want to see them thrive, to enjoy the fruits of their labor, not survive like hunted animals in the shadows. Yet, this is the very essence of the drama that keeps us coming back to our screens day after day, year after year. The writers are weaving a complex, tangled web of morality, fear, and fierce family loyalty that will undoubtedly push every single character to their absolute limits. Even when the storylines deeply frustrate us or challenge our understanding of the people we have watched grow and evolve, our passion for this show remains entirely steadfast. We will sit on the edge of our seats, clutching our pearls, waiting to see if Curtis can somehow find his way back to the light, or if this desperate, frantic flight will cost him everything he holds dear in this world. Until tomorrow, my friends, keep watching, keep hoping, and hold your loved ones close.